Rebecca clutched the envelope with trembling hands. For years, she had scrubbed these floors, never imagining the secrets buried within these walls. As she tore it open, her heart pounded. Inside was the truth that could destroy everything she knew or set her free. But what she read made her world spin out of control. Rebecca was in the middle of her daily chores when a knock at the door disrupted her routine. She opened it to find a man with a serious expression handing her an official-looking envelope. She hesitated for a moment before taking it, sensing that whatever was inside could change everything. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the letter, the weight of an impending storm settling over her. She shut the door, her mind racing with possibilities. What could this be? She stared at the envelope, its presence on the kitchen table an ominous reminder of the unknown. For years, she had scrubbed these very floors, polishing the grandeur that was never hers. The thought that something could be buried within these walls had never crossed her mind. Yet here was an envelope that could unravel it all. The room around her felt both familiar and strange, the silence heavy with anticipation. She knew she had to open it, but part of her wanted to remain in the bliss of ignorance. Taking a deep breath, Rebecca tore open the envelope. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing louder as she unfolded the papers inside. The words on the page blurred for a moment before snapping into sharp focus. What she read was beyond anything she could have imagined. Her eyes widened in shock, the realization of what this meant sinking in like a stone. She felt the ground beneath her shift, the stability she had clung to for so long crumbling away. The letter contained a legal summons, notifying her that she was being sued by the very family she had served for years. The accusation was baseless, a desperate attempt by the family to hold onto something they no longer had a right to. But the implications were severe. If she lost, she could be left with nothing. Her years of hard work and loyalty erased in an instant. The power dynamics she had always known were shifting, and the ground she stood on was no longer solid. Rebecca's world spun as the weight of the situation hit her fully. This wasn't just about the house or the job. It was about her entire life being thrown into chaos. The family she had trusted, who she thought had accepted her, was now turning against her in the worst possible way. She could feel her control slipping away, the familiar becoming foreign. What was she supposed to do now? How could she possibly fight this? The fear that had been simmering beneath the surface now threatened to overwhelm her, leaving her reeling with uncertainty. Rebecca was not born into wealth or privilege. Her life had always been marked by hard work and sacrifice. As a child, she had learned early on that nothing came easy, especially for someone from her humble background. Growing up in a small, crowded home, she had watched her parents toil endlessly just to keep food on the table. Those experiences shaped her, instilling a sense of determination and resilience that would carry her through the toughest times. But no matter how hard she worked, it never seemed to be enough. Every day, she would rise before the sun, her body moving on autopilot as she prepared for another long day of cleaning and scrubbing. The mansion where she worked was a far cry from the life she knew. It was a world of opulence and luxury, a stark contrast to the modest surroundings she called home. The grand halls and lavish rooms were a constant reminder of what she did not have, of the life that seemed so far out of reach. Despite the disparity, Rebecca took pride in her work. She had a reputation for being thorough, meticulous even, and she made sure every corner of that mansion sparkled. But it wasn't just about the money, although she needed every penny. It was about doing something well, about finding a small sense of accomplishment in a life that often felt overwhelming. Still, there were moments when she couldn't help but feel a pang of envy, wondering what it would be like to live in such comfort. The mansion loomed large in her mind, not just as a place of work, but as a symbol of the chasm between her world and the world of those she served. The people who lived there had no idea of the struggle she faced, the sacrifices she made just to get by. To them, she was invisible, a background figure who kept their lives running smoothly. But to Rebecca, every day in that mansion was a reminder of her place in the world and how far she had yet to go. Rebecca's routine was relentless, but it was all she knew. As she scrubbed the floors, polished the silver, and dusted the countless artifacts that adorned the mansion's rooms. Her mind often wandered to what could be, to a life where she didn't have to work so hard just to survive. But dreams like that were dangerous, she reminded herself. Better to focus on the task at hand, to take pride in the work she did, and to keep her head down. The last thing she needed was to attract attention in a place where she was meant to remain unnoticed. Rebecca couldn't shake the anxiety that gripped her. The legal summons had been a shock, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. She knew she had to take action, to find out what this was all about. With her heart pounding, she decided to visit the lawyer mentioned in the letter. She hoped it was all just a misunderstanding, something that could be cleared up with a few words. As she walked to the lawyer's office, her mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps it was a mistake, a mix-up in paperwork. Surely that was all it could be. But what if it wasn't? The thought lingered, dark and foreboding. But she forced herself to focus on the positive. She had to believe that things would be all right, that there was a simple explanation waiting for her. The office was modest, not the imposing place she had feared. As she sat down across from the lawyer, she noticed the reassuring smile he offered her. She explained her situation, her voice steady but laced with the hope that he would confirm her suspicions. This was all just a big mistake. She waited for him to say something that would ease her mind, but his expression turned serious as he glanced at the documents before him. Rebecca felt her heart sink. The lawyer's words were calm, measured, but they carried a weight that she wasn't prepared for. He explained that the situation was more complex than she had hoped, and while he assured her that he would help her navigate through it, the unease in her chest grew. This wasn't the quick resolution she had prayed for. As she left the office, the hope she had clung to felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. She had taken the first step, but it was clear that this was only the beginning of a much longer and more difficult journey. Rebecca entered the grand living room, its opulence a sharp contrast to the modest life she had always known. The wealthy family sat in front of her, their expressions cold and unwelcoming. She had hoped for understanding, but the moment she began to speak, she was met with stern faces and dismissive gestures. Their denial of her claim was swift and absolute, leaving no room for negotiation. The head of the family, Jonathan, spoke with an air of superiority, his voice dripping with disdain. He dismissed her as nothing more than a greedy opportunist, a woman trying to take advantage of their kindness. His words cut deep, shattering any illusion Rebecca had held onto that they might listen to her plea. As Jonathan's accusations grew harsher, Rebecca felt her strength waning. She had prepared herself for resistance, but not for this level of hostility. Her heart ached as the reality of her situation sank in. These people, who once treated her with some level of decency, now saw her as an enemy. Her confidence eroded with every word, leaving her feeling small and powerless. Overwhelmed by the rejection and the cold, calculating stares, Rebecca's composure began to crack. Her emotions swirled in a storm of fear, anger, and helplessness. She tried to argue her case, but her voice wavered, barely audible against the forceful denial she faced. The room felt larger, more intimidating, as if it was closing in on her, suffocating her hopes. Finally, she could no longer bear the hostility. Her shoulders slumped, and with a trembling sigh, she stepped back, feeling as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. The encounter had left her feeling utterly defeated, and as she turned to leave, the grandeur of the mansion seemed to mock her, a towering symbol of the barrier she now faced. As the days passed, whispers began to circulate through the neighborhood. The once welcoming smiles of Rebecca's neighbors turned into tight-lipped stares, and she could feel their eyes on her even when her back was turned. The wealthy family, angered by her persistence, had begun to spread rumors, painting her as a gold digger and a liar. These rumors quickly took root, and soon, even those who had once been her friends started to believe the worst. They avoided her in the streets, their conversations cutting off abruptly whenever she approached. Rebecca found herself increasingly isolated, the warmth of her community replaced by a cold, judgmental silence. At the grocery store, she overheard a group of women talking about her, their voices dropping to a whisper as soon as they noticed her nearby. The words they exchanged were sharp and cruel, filled with accusations she couldn't even begin to defend herself against. Her hands trembled as she continued with her shopping, feeling the weight of their gossip pressing down on her. At home, the phone stopped ringing. Friends who used to call regularly had fallen silent, their absence a painful reminder of how quickly her life was unraveling. Rebecca tried to reach out, but each attempt was met with polite excuses or no response at all. The rejection from her social circle hurt almost as much as the family's betrayal. The mounting pressure from the outside world began to take its toll on Rebecca. She found herself questioning everything, wondering if she was truly in the wrong. But deep down, she knew the truth. The situation was spiraling out of control, and she was running out of options. Rebecca's world seemed to crumble as she received the news that she had lost her job. The one source of stability and income she had relied on was now gone, leaving her in a state of shock and desperation. The bills were piling up, and without a steady income, she found herself rapidly running out of options. The once modest life she led was now slipping through her fingers as financial pressures mounted. Desperate to find a way to fight back against the false accusations and regain her dignity, Rebecca began searching for legal representation. However, every lawyer she contacted demanded a retainer fee that she simply could not afford. The harsh reality of her situation was becoming painfully clear. Without money, she had no way to defend herself in court. Her frustration grew as she realized that justice was slipping further out of reach with each passing day. Sitting at her kitchen table, Rebecca counted the last of her savings. Her hands trembled as she carefully laid out the bills and coins, the small pile a stark reminder of how dire her circumstances had become. The fear of what lay ahead gnawed at her, but she knew she had to keep going, even if the path forward seemed impossible. As Rebecca's situation worsened, a new and terrifying challenge emerged. Jonathan, a powerful and calculating family member, stepped forward as the primary antagonist. He wasn't just a distant relative. He was someone with influence and resources, someone who had always seemed to look down on Rebecca. Now, he was using his power to take legal action against her, accusing her of things she could barely comprehend. The legal papers were delivered to her door, each word a reminder of how dire her situation had become. Jonathan, known for his cold and imposing demeanor, was a man who thrived on control. His sharp, steely blue eyes reflected his calculated intent, and his presence alone could intimidate even the strongest of opponents. As he confronted Rebecca, his voice was laced with disdain, and his towering figure made her feel small and helpless. He was not just attacking her livelihood. He was dismantling her entire world piece by piece. The confrontation between Rebecca and Jonathan was intense and unnerving. He loomed over her, his figure imposing as he delivered his threats. Rebecca, standing there with her heart pounding, felt the crushing weight of his words. She knew this was a battle she wasn't prepared for, and the reality of her vulnerability was more evident than ever. The weight of Jonathan's threats hung heavily on Rebecca's shoulders. As she sat alone in her modest apartment, doubts began to creep into her mind. For the first time, she questioned her ability to stand against someone as powerful as Jonathan. Memories of past failures surfaced, amplifying her insecurities. The confidence she once had seemed to erode with each passing moment, leaving her feeling lost and powerless. Seeking comfort, Rebecca reached out to Emily, her closest friend. Over coffee, they talked about her fears and the overwhelming pressure she was under. Emily listened intently, offering words of encouragement, but even her reassurances couldn't fully chase away the doubt in Rebecca's heart. Rebecca voiced her deepest fears, wondering aloud if she had the strength to continue the fight. The vulnerability in her voice was palpable, and for a moment, even Emily struggled to find the right words to comfort her friend. Despite Emily's support, Rebecca's internal conflict only grew. She wrestled with feelings of inadequacy and fear, feeling increasingly isolated as the reality of her situation became more apparent. The once clear path forward was now clouded with uncertainty, and Rebecca found herself questioning not just her decisions but her worth as a person. Just as Rebecca's resolve seemed to be waning, an unexpected visitor arrived at her door. Michael, an older man with sharp eyes and a confident demeanor, offered his help. He He was a lawyer with a reputation for taking on seemingly impossible cases. His methods, however, were unconventional and often controversial. Rebecca listened cautiously as he outlined a strategy that was both bold and risky, far removed from anything she had considered. Michael's approach added new layers of complexity to her situation, but it also provided a glimmer of hope she desperately needed. Michael's plan involved leveraging loopholes and pushing legal boundaries, tactics that made Rebecca uneasy. Yet, as he spoke, there was a conviction in his voice that was hard to ignore. He assured her that his approach, while unconventional, was necessary given the power and influence of her adversary. Rebecca found herself torn between fear and the desperate desire to reclaim control of her life. Michael's confidence was contagious, and despite her reservations, she began to see the potential in his audacious plan. As Michael made his final point, he leaned forward, his presence looming large over the small table where they sat. From Rebecca's perspective, he appeared as a powerful figure offering a lifeline in her darkest hour. The significance of his offer was not lost on her. It was a chance to fight back, but it came with risks that could either lead to salvation or further devastation. With a renewed sense of purpose, Rebecca and Michael sat together, determined to unravel the truth hidden behind layers of deceit. They pored over documents, tracing connections and uncovering discrepancies that had been overlooked. As they worked through the night, Rebecca felt a spark of hope ignite within her. The leads they discovered, though faint, hinted at the possibility of exposing the truth and reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Their strategy began to take shape. Michael's extensive knowledge of legal intricacies complemented Rebecca's intimate understanding of the situation. They devised a plan to gather undeniable evidence that would prove her inheritance claims. Each step in their plan was carefully considered, from tracing financial records to interviewing potential witnesses who might hold the key to unlocking the truth. The more they uncovered, the more it seemed they were on the verge of a breakthrough. As the night wore on, the two of them, despite their exhaustion, continued to brainstorm, their ideas flowing with increasing momentum. The energy in the room shifted from desperation to determination. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place, and for the first time in a long while, Rebecca felt like she was gaining control of her life. Yet, the path ahead was still fraught with challenges, and they both knew the fight was far from over. Just when Rebecca and Michael thought they were making progress, an unexpected disaster struck. They realized that a critical piece of evidence, a document they had painstakingly tracked down, was missing. Frantically searching the room, Rebecca's heart sank as it became clear that the document had vanished. The weight of this loss hung heavily over them, threatening to undo all their efforts. The atmosphere grew tense as they tried to understand how the document could have disappeared. Michael retraced their steps, but every lead turned into a dead end. It was as if someone had deliberately sabotaged their work. Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that Jonathan was behind this, somehow always one step ahead, frustrating their every move. As the realization of the missing evidence set in, Rebecca felt a wave of disorientation wash over her. The room seemed to tilt as she grappled with the implications of this loss. Without this crucial document, their entire plan was at risk of falling apart. The frustration and helplessness in that moment were palpable, but they knew they had to press on, despite the overwhelming odds stacked against them. The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with tension as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Rebecca held her breath, every nerve in her body taut with anticipation. But when the words finally came, they cut through her like a knife. The ruling was against her. The case that had consumed her life, the fight she had poured every ounce of energy into, was lost. The crushing weight of defeat was immediate and overwhelming, leaving her reeling in disbelief. As the reality of the situation sank in, Rebecca's ally, Michael, stood silently beside her. His once unwavering confidence began to waver. He had believed in their mission, in Rebecca's determination to claim what was rightfully hers, but now doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. His faith in their cause, and perhaps in Rebecca's ability to carry on, started to falter. Unable to hold back her emotions, Rebecca crumbled as they exited the courtroom. Tears streamed down her face, her body shaking with the sobs she could no longer suppress. The defeat felt insurmountable, a chasm she had no strength left to cross. In that moment, all seemed lost, and the path forward became a blur of despair and uncertainty. Rebecca sat alone in the small, dimly lit room, the weight of her defeat pressing down on her shoulders. The silence around her was deafening, amplifying the despair that had taken root in her heart. She had fought so hard, only to face a loss so crushing that it left her questioning everything. The thought of giving up began to creep into her mind, a small voice whispering that perhaps it was time to let go, to stop fighting a battle that seemed impossible to win. The days following the court ruling were a blur of loneliness and isolation. Friends who had once stood by her now kept their distance, unsure of how to console someone so deeply defeated. Rebecca's world grew smaller, her isolation more pronounced with each passing day. The loneliness was suffocating, a constant reminder of her failure and the bleakness of her future. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Rebecca found herself sitting on the cold, hard floor, her knees drawn up to her chest. From above, she looked like a small, vulnerable figure lost in a vast, empty space. The weight of her situation pressed down on her, making her feel even smaller, even more insignificant. The darkness outside seemed to seep into her very soul, and for the first time, she truly felt the enormity of her despair. In the midst of Rebecca's growing despair, an unexpected discovery changes everything. While going through some old files, she stumbles upon a document hidden away for years, its contents shocking and potentially game-changing. This document contains a testimony that was never submitted in court, one that could turn the entire case on its head. The words on the page reveal secrets long buried, making it clear that there was more to the case than anyone realized. As she reads through the document, the gravity of the situation becomes clear. This revelation, while offering a glimmer of hope, also introduces new complications. The testimony points to powerful individuals who have much to lose if the truth comes out. Rebecca realizes that uncovering this truth might bring even greater dangers. The stakes are higher than ever, and the threats she now faces are not just legal but potentially life-threatening. Rebecca knows she cannot ignore what she has found, but the decision to move forward is fraught with risk. As she contemplates her next steps, the document lies open before her, the crucial details highlighted, illuminating the path she must take. The once distant hope for justice now seems within reach, but at a cost that could be higher than she ever imagined. Rebecca, now armed with the knowledge from the hidden document, makes a resolute decision to fight back, despite the immense risks that lie ahead. The gravity of the situation weighs on her, but her determination to seek justice for herself and those affected drives her forward. She knows that the path she is about to take is fraught with danger, but she has come too far to turn back now. With renewed vigor, she begins to prepare for what will undoubtedly be the final battle, her resolve unshaken by the threats that loom over her. However, Rebecca quickly realizes that her renewed determination is met with fierce opposition. Jonathan, aware of the revelation she has uncovered, uses every resource at his disposal to crush her efforts. The legal system, too, seems to be stacked against her, with obstacles at every turn. Rebecca faces not only legal maneuvers meant to discredit her, but also underhanded tactics designed to intimidate and silence her. The opposition is relentless, and at times, it feels as though the entire system is conspiring against her. Despite these challenges, Rebecca pushes forward with unwavering resolve. She spends long hours preparing her case, gathering evidence, and strategizing her next moves. The once timid and unsure woman has transformed into a fierce advocate, ready to face whatever comes her way. As she stands in front of a mirror, taking a moment to gather her thoughts, her reflection is one of sheer determination. This is the moment she has been fighting for, and she will not let it slip away. As Rebecca's battle intensifies, Michael, her steadfast ally and legal counsel, begins to express his doubts. He has been her rock through many challenges, but now the risks seem overwhelming. During a tense conversation, Michael confesses his growing concerns about the viability of their case. The legal system seems insurmountable, and he fears they might be chasing a lost cause. His voice, once filled with confidence, now carries the weight of uncertainty. Rebecca listens in silence, her heart sinking as she realizes that even those closest to her are beginning to lose faith. The doubt sown by Michael's words lingers with Rebecca, creating a heavy sense of isolation. She had relied on her small circle of support, and now, with their confidence wavering, she feels the crushing burden of solitude. Every step forward feels lonelier than the last, and the once clear path to justice now appears obscured by shadows of doubt. The walls around her seem to close in as she contemplates the possibility of facing this battle alone. Her determination, though still present, is tested by the weakening resolve of her allies. The conversation with Michael leaves Rebecca emotionally drained. She tries to gather herself, but the fear of abandonment by those she trusts gnaws at her spirit. As she sits alone in her dimly lit office, surrounded by files and evidence that once felt powerful, she realizes how much she depended on the strength of her team. The growing distance between her and her allies makes the fight ahead seem even more daunting. Yet, deep within, a spark of resilience remains, urging her to continue despite the crumbling support around her. Rebecca finds herself alone in the quiet stillness of her office, the weight of the recent events pressing heavily on her mind. She begins to reflect on the long journey that has brought her to this moment. The challenges, the sacrifices, and the crumbling support of her allies all swirl in her thoughts as she contemplates whether she has been approaching this fight the right way. The idea of changing her strategy begins to take root, as the familiar path seems less certain and more fraught with peril than ever before. Sitting at her desk, Rebecca engages in a deep internal monologue, questioning every decision she has made. Memories of past failures and fleeting successes flash through her mind, each one a reminder of how far she has come and how much is still at stake. Her thoughts are interrupted by the voice of a mentor, whose wisdom she has often sought in times of doubt. The conversation, whether imagined or real, helps her weigh the options before her. The mentor's words resonate with her, urging her to consider a different approach, one that might offer a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. The reflection culminates as Rebecca looks out of the window, her gaze fixed on the distant city lights that twinkle in the night. The world outside seems both close and impossibly far away, a symbol of the life she's fighting to reclaim. She knows the decision she makes now will determine the course of her future. Alone with her thoughts, Rebecca takes a deep breath, ready to face whatever comes next, even if it means venturing into uncharted territory. Rebecca sits at her desk, her eyes tracing over the notes and documents scattered before her. Small, seemingly insignificant details begin to stand out. Pieces that once appeared irrelevant now seem to connect. She recalls moments from earlier in her journey, fragments of conversations, odd coincidences, and overlooked clues, all beginning to form a pattern. But the bigger picture remains just out of reach, the solution still eluding her grasp. She knows she's on the verge of something, but what that something is continues to slip through her fingers. As she flips through the pages of her journal, Rebecca finds herself drawn back to a specific moment, a fleeting interaction she had nearly forgotten. The memory flashes vividly in her mind, a detail that seemed trivial at the time now taking on a new significance. Her thoughts race as she connects it to another clue she discovered earlier, but frustration sets in as she realizes the puzzle is still incomplete. The answers are there, but the final piece, the one that would bring it all together, remains hidden. Rebecca stands and begins pacing the room, her mind working tirelessly to piece together the fragmented clues. She reviews the details in her mind, revisiting past encounters in her thoughts. Each memory, once a standalone moment, now weaves together, forming a tapestry that hints at a solution just beyond her reach. But despite her best efforts, the full picture refuses to come into focus, leaving her feeling both closer and further away from the truth than ever before. Rebecca feels the weight of the situation pressing down on her as the pieces of the puzzle stubbornly refuse to come together. Her mind races, but every possible solution seems to lead to a dead end. The pressure mounts as she realizes just how dire the circumstances have become. She's cornered, with no clear path to escape the trap that has been meticulously laid out for her. The walls feel like they're closing in, and for the first time, doubt clouds her resolve. The sense of defeat begins to creep in, but she knows she can't give up. Yet the way forward remains shrouded in uncertainty. As she confronts Jonathan, the man who has been behind so much of her suffering, the reality of her situation hits her with full force. His cold, calculating demeanor only serves to deepen her despair. She attempts to reason with him, to find some way to turn the tide in her favor, but Jonathan's responses are as chilling as they are final. Every argument, every plea she makes, is met with unyielding resistance. It becomes clear that he has anticipated her every move, and the inevitability of her downfall seems all but assured. The confrontation leaves her drained, as if every ounce of hope has been systematically stripped away. The world around her starts to spin, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming sense of loss. Rebecca stumbles as the gravity of her predicament takes hold. The room seems to tilt, the floor unsteady beneath her feet. It's a chaotic scene, mirroring the turmoil within her. The sense of defeat is nearly overpowering, as if the very ground is betraying her. She is left standing on the precipice of failure, with the abyss of despair yawning before her, threatening to swallow her whole. Rebecca's mind races as she stares at the scattered pieces of the puzzle, the weight of hopelessness heavy on her shoulders. Just as she begins to feel the full weight of defeat, a small, seemingly insignificant detail catches her eye. It's something she overlooked before, something buried in the chaos that suddenly snaps into focus. She recalls a conversation, a moment she had dismissed as unimportant. The realization hits her with the force of a lightning bolt. Everything that had seemed random and disjointed now aligns perfectly. It's as if the fog that clouded her mind clears, revealing the path that was hidden in plain sight all along. The truth was there, woven into the fabric of her journey, waiting for her to see it. The twist unfolds in her mind like a revelation, and she feels a surge of clarity and resolve. She revisits each step, each clue, and sees how they all connect to form a picture she never anticipated. Jonathan, so confident in his manipulations, had underestimated her. He left a trail of breadcrumbs that now lead her to the key that could turn everything around. The sense of defeat that had overwhelmed her begins to lift, replaced by a newfound determination. She isn't beaten yet, not by a long shot. Armed with this knowledge, she knows exactly what she must do. The feeling of empowerment washes over her as she realizes the advantage she now holds. As the final pieces click into place, Rebecca's moment of realization is powerful. She stands tall, no longer burdened by uncertainty or fear. Her eyes are filled with determination, her posture strong and unyielding. The twist that once seemed like her downfall is now her greatest weapon. In this moment, she understands that the power to change her fate lies within her grasp, and she's ready to confront whatever comes next. The light of hope that had nearly been extinguished now burns brightly, guiding her toward the resolution she's been fighting for all along. The tables have turned, and with this revelation, she is more powerful than ever before. Rebecca stands in the grand hall of the mansion, the same place where her journey began, but now the atmosphere is entirely different. The once cold and oppressive space is now warm, filled with light and a sense of peace. She looks around, taking in the grandeur that is now rightfully hers. The documents that secured her inheritance rest in her hands, a tangible reminder of her victory. The years of struggle and uncertainty have finally culminated in this moment of triumph. Jonathan, with his power stripped away, is a distant memory, no longer a threat to her or her family's legacy. The relief is palpable, and for the first time in what feels like forever, Rebecca feels at ease. Time shifts, and we see Rebecca several years later. She's walking through the lush gardens of the mansion, which have flourished under her care. The estate, once neglected and nearly lost, now thrives, reflecting the inner transformation she has undergone. Her expression is one of calm satisfaction, the weight of the past finally lifted. The relationships she had nearly lost are restored, stronger than before. The mansion, a symbol of her journey, stands proudly in the background, its walls no longer holding secrets, but memories of a hard-fought battle won. Rebecca's life is no longer defined by the challenges she faced but by the peace and prosperity she has cultivated.
This story really struck a chord with me. It reminds us that even in our darkest times, There's always a chance for redemption if we're brave enough to pursue it. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments, I'd love to hear. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. If you're ready for another unforgettable tale, click on the video on your screen. See you there.